Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking part in this fiscal year 2018 training on state purchasing procedures and the State Purchasing Card Program. I'm Courtney Johnson with the Purchasing Division, and I'm pleased to welcome all West Virginia state officials who are required to take this annual training. I know you all have busy schedules, so I appreciate you taking 2 hours out of your day today to participate in this session. West Virginia Code 5A-3-60 requires certain state officials to take 2 hours of training annually on purchasing procedures and purchasing card use. Those required to take this training include all executive department cabinet secretaries and their deputies, commissioners and their deputies and assistant commissioners, directors and their deputies and assistant directors, and department heads and their deputies and department assistants. This training is offered twice per fiscal year via WebEx. These sessions are also recorded and made available online on the State Auditor's Office and the Purchasing Division's websites. The online recording will suffice to meet this requirement for any individual who is unable to participate in one of the 2 scheduled live webinars. For those individuals who choose to view the online recording, they must send us their certificate of completion to ensure they receive credit for viewing the training. Today's session will last until approximately 11 o'clock. I will begin with information on the state purchasing procedures, and I will be followed by Travis Mullinax from the State Auditor's Office. The Purchasing Division has a staff of approximately 55 full-time employees at the Capitol Complex in Building 15 and at the surplus property location in Dunbar. The Purchasing Division provides a service function to your agencies. We are responsible for the procurement of goods and services that your organization needs to operate your programs and services. These are the folks who help make that happen. As mentioned, today's webinar will be recorded and posted on the Purchasing Division's website and also on the State Auditor's Office website within the next few weeks. This live webinar and its recording have been approved for 2.4 hours of CLE credit from the West Virginia State Bar. If you are interested in obtaining CLE credits for today's live webinar, please email your name and bar ID number to Samantha Knapp at the email address located on this screen. Should you have any questions throughout today's presentation, you may type them into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll take a few minutes at the end of today's presentation to answer these questions. Those of you on today's webinar represent the top level of management within state government. You are all responsible for leading and managing the delivery of services required of your agencies to the citizens of West Virginia. But in order for your agencies to be successful in delivering these mandated services to our citizens, your agencies need many different types of commodities and services. The Purchasing Division's core function is to obtain on your behalf the commodities and services needed to allow you to fulfill your mission. We depend on and work closely with your procurement staff to fulfill these needs. On this slide, you can see the Purchasing Division's mission, and that is to provide prudent and fair spending practices in procuring quality goods and services at the lowest cost to state taxpayers by maximizing efficiencies and offering guidance to our customers. During today's webinar, we hope that you will obtain a general understanding of who we are, but also what we do and how we do it. Before we talk about the process of procurement, I would like to review the organizational structure of the Purchasing Division. As you can see on the screen, Mike Sheets serves as the Director of the Purchasing Division. The division is then made up of 3 sections in addition to our legal counsel. They include the Acquisitions and Contract Administration section, the Communication and Technical Services section, and Program Services. The following staff members oversee these various sections. Assistant Director Frank Whitaker oversees the Acquisitions and Contract Administration section. Assistant Director Diane Hawley Brown oversees the Communication and Technical Services section. Assistant Director Elizabeth Perdue oversees Program Services. Additionally, Jimmy Meadows serves as the Purchasing Division's General Counsel. And now I will highlight the responsibilities of each section. The Acquisitions and Contract Administration section is responsible for processing purchases expected to exceed $25,000 on behalf of state agencies which fall under our authority. This section also maintains the contract management and agency inspection services programs. We have a staff of 12 buyers and supervisors who are responsible for obtaining the commodities and services on behalf of state agencies. Our buyers are assigned by agency rather than by commodity. They serve as the subject matter experts on the state purchasing process rather than on the specific commodities and services they buy. The reason we're organized this way is because we believe our expertise should be in our core mission, which is purchasing, and that the staff within your agencies have the specific technical expertise, in most cases, of the commodities and services that you need. Having our buyers assign specific agencies means that each of your agencies has a sole point of contact in the purchasing division, which allows the purchasing division to provide better customer service to your agencies. The assigned buyer for your agency works together with your agency-designated procurement officer or officers to buy the commodities and services required by your agencies. We feel these relationships are critical in ensuring success during the procurement process. The next section of the purchasing division is the Communication and Technical Services section. This section is responsible for technology, communication, professional development and training, and related administrative functions, including vendor registration, imaging and record retention, bid receipt, and purchase order encumbrance. The final section is Program Services. This section is responsible for several programs administered by division, including the Surplus Property Program, which manages the state and federal programs for property no longer needed within the respective governments, the Travel Management Office, which offers guidance to state business travelers and oversees statewide contracts for travel-related services, and the Fixed Assets Unit, which maintains the state's inventory of personal property. As mentioned previously, we also have a general counsel who manages our legal affairs, including contract terms and conditions, disputes and resolutions, drafting legislation, and other relevant legal and administrative issues. Most state governments throughout the nation have a centralized procurement function similar to West Virginia. However, the administration and rules vary with each state. West Virginia Code centralizes the procurement function of state government within the purchasing division in the same way that other functions are centralized for most agencies, such as personnel, technology, finance, and retirement. Some of the benefits of a centralized procurement function include having the consistency of laws, rules, and procedures, gaining economies of scale, and providing system transparency. The purchasing division manages procurement transactions for agencies under its authority, including but not limited to those for commodities, services, and technology. State agencies have been delegated the authority to make purchases up to $25,000, with the purchasing division processing all transactions expected to exceed that dollar threshold. The purchasing division has awarded statewide contracts for commonly used commodities and services, including office supplies, technology equipment and services, and vehicles. We bid and award statewide contracts for these common commodities and services on behalf of all state agencies to take advantage of the economies of scale and to make the ordering process more efficient. A list of all statewide contracts can be found on the purchasing division's website. We also buy a wide range of agency-specific commodities and services, including food to medical supplies and everything in between. We also piggyback selected contracts that have been bid and awarded by other public entities around the country to gain economies of scale and shorten the procurement process. All of our procedures are based on laws and rules established in West Virginia Code and the West Virginia Code of State Rules. Our primary code citation is 5A-3, and our rules can be found as Title 148, Section 1 of the Code of State Rules. As noted on this slide, there are also specific code citations for architectural and engineering services, construction, and our two set-aside programs, correctional industries and the state use program. As is the case with many other state functions, there are some exceptions to this centralized procurement system. The legislature has statutorily granted various state agencies the ability to perform some or all of those agencies' needed procurement functions outside of the centralized procurement mandate. At this time, the Purchasing Division is aware of 42 full or partial statutory exemptions. Full exemptions include entities such as the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and higher education, while partial exemptions have been granted for the Division of Highways for road construction and PEIA contracts for insurance coverage, among many others. The Purchasing Division has compiled an unofficial list of these statutory exemptions, which can be found on the Purchasing Division's website. Title 148 of the Code of State Rules stipulates that all purchases have to be approved by the Secretary or head of a spending unit or designee whose name has to be filed with the Purchasing Division. The person designated is responsible for the agency's procurement function at the agency delegated level and also works directly with the Purchasing Division to process formal acquisitions expected to exceed $25,000. They should be involved at all levels of any future purchases your agency plans to make. Their understanding and knowledge of the state purchasing process can ensure that your agency is in compliance with state law. It is essential that the designated procurement officers are trained on the Purchasing Division's procedures. In addition to being responsible for any internal training conducted at the agency level, the designee is now also required by the West Virginia Code of State Rules to attend 10 hours annually of training offered by the Purchasing Division, which is tracked on a fiscal year basis. The designated procurement officers for each state spending unit under our authority are listed on our website. The link will be included at the end of our presentation today. We have a comprehensive training program to educate our agency purchasers on the laws and rules which govern the state purchasing process and to assist them in obtaining the 10 hours of required training annually. Trainings are offered through a variety of platforms, including in person, online via webinars and training modules, and through an annual conference. We also maintain a state certification program which has been recognized by the Division of Personnel as part of its pay plan policy. That program incorporates public procurement experience, training offered by the Purchasing Division, a hands-on component, and a final examination. More information on our training program can be found on our website, wvpurchasing.gov, by clicking on the training link on the left-hand side of the page. During fiscal year 2017, the Purchasing Division reports more than 19,000 new award transactions and delivery orders were processed, exceeding $335 million. This number includes all delivery orders processed against central master agreements at both the agency level, which are called agency delivery orders, and through the Purchasing Division, which are called central delivery orders. A central master agreement, which is processed by the Purchasing Division, covers a period of time in which all terms, conditions, and prices are specified with the exception of quantity, but delivery orders may be made from these contracts for specific quantities. Nearly 55% of the contracts and delivery orders for fiscal year 2017 were awarded to West Virginia companies. In addition to our new purchase and delivery orders, we also processed more than 2,000 change orders to existing contracts. These numbers show the significance of what we do. It is because this money comes from our taxpayer dollars that we have a duty to ensure that it is being spent efficiently and ethically. For this reason, we have developed a decision path to assist our agency purchases from the time the agency determines a need to the award of a purchase order or contract. For additional statistical data for fiscal year 2017, please see our annual report that may be accessed from our homepage at wvpurchasing.gov. This slide highlights the first few steps in that decision path. Step 1 requires the agency to first determine its need. In other words, what is the product or service required by the agency, and at what quality level and in what quantity do you need, what is the estimated cost, and are there any special delivery requirements? Once you have determined that information, you can move on to step 2 of the process, which is seeking availability through internal sources. There are 3 internal sources, including correctional industries, the State Use Program, also known as Sheltered Workshops, and the West Virginia State Agency for Surplus Property. Correctional industries and sheltered workshops are mandatory for use. That means if the product or service is available through either of these entities, it must be acquired in this manner. If the product or service is available but not in the required time, quality, quantity, or other factors, then a written waiver must be issued from correctional industries or sheltered workshops in accordance with purchasing guidelines. Surplus property is optional but strongly encouraged for use for state agencies when needing furniture, vehicles, equipment, and many other commodities. A waiver from surplus property is not required, but keep in mind that it is another source that may save your agency money. If the product or service is not available from any of the internal sources, Step 3 requires the agency to determine if the product or service is available from a statewide or agency contract. If it is available from either of these contracts, the agency must purchase the product or service from the statewide or agency contract. Although we don't have it mentioned on this slide, if the commodity or service is not available from a statewide or agency contract, the next step requires the agency to determine if the purchase is considered an emergency purchase or sole source. I'll go into more detail about these purchase types later, but for your reference, more information on these types of purchases can be found in Section 3 of the Purchasing Division Procedures Handbook. If you've gone through the first few steps of this process and can't find the commodity or service on any of these mandatory contracts, at this point you would be looking at the competitive bidding process. There are several types of competitive solicitations used by the Purchasing Division. I'll get into those in a minute, but first, please note that agencies are delegated the authority to purchase up to $25,000. There are some bidding thresholds within that amount that they should be aware of. The thresholds within agency delegated authority are outlined on this slide. Agencies cannot exceed a bid threshold without the proper level of documentation and bidding. Commodities and services that are expected to cost $2,500 or less require no bids. Purchases of $2,500.01 to $5,000 require 3 verbal bids, and the lowest bid meeting specifications must be awarded the purchase order or contract. Purchases of $5,000.01 to $25,000 require 3 written bids, and the lowest bid meeting specifications must be awarded the purchase order or contract. Any purchase expected to exceed $25,000 is considered a formal purchase and must be processed through the Purchasing Division. In short, if a purchase is not considered an emergency or sole source, the agency would process the competitive solicitation at the agency level following its agency delegated procedures if it's expected to cost $25,000 or less, or at the formal level if it is expected to exceed $25,000. All vendors conducting business with the state of West Virginia are required to register with the Purchasing Division in accordance with West Virginia Code 5A-3-12. There is an exception to this registration requirement, which are purchasing card vendors providing travel-related services or receiving an aggregate total yearly payment of less than $25,000 from a state spending unit. Keep in mind, vendors do not have to register to submit a bid, but only to receive a purchase order or contract. Vendors are encouraged to register through the Vendor Self-Service Portal as part of WV Oasis, but may also still complete a paper form through our registration office. Vendors receiving orders for products or services exceeding $2,500, regardless of payment method, must pay an annual fee of $125. There are a couple of exceptions as to who must pay this fee. These include purchasing card vendors providing travel-related services or receiving an aggregate total yearly payment of less than $25,000 from a spending unit, as well as sole source vendors and those vendors who are providing products and services that have been declared as non-competitive exempted products or services listed in Section 9 of our Purchasing Division Procedures Handbook. Vendors must also be in good standing with other state and local agencies, such as the Secretary of State's Office and Workers' Compensation, to be able to receive a purchase order or contract. Anytime your agency determines that it will need to competitively solicit goods or services, you should immediately begin to think about the specifications, which will be the basis for everything you'll do moving forward. A specification is a concise statement explaining the type of product or service that is needed, the quality level, and special requirements in the design, performance, delivery, and usage. There are three different types of specifications, which include brand name or equal, performance, and design. In short, the brand name or equal type requires the words or equal to follow the brand name to inform vendors that alternate bids will be considered. The performance specification focuses more on how well an item operates and includes total ownership costs for operating and maintaining the product. The design specification concentrates on the dimensional and other physical requirements of the item being purchased and is used when a commodity has to be specially made to meet the agency's unique needs. Specifications are incorporated into the requisition that the agency submits to the purchasing division for formal purchases and into the solicitation advertised by agencies for agency delegated purchases. Not only do specifications tell the vendor exactly what you need, they often serve as your defense if a vendor protests an award. We'll get into protests a little later on. Specifications are so important that the Purchasing Division introduced a new award at its conference this year based entirely on specifications. Effective immediately, we are accepting nominations from agencies for the Excellence in Specification Writing Award. We will announce its first recipient at the 2018 Agency Purchasing Conference. The award will focus on scope, money and pricing, administrative, time, and appearance and readability. A copy of the criteria for this award can be found on the Purchasing Division's intranet site. Now that we've discussed the importance of specifications, let's go over some of the competitive solicitation types used by the Purchasing Division. The most commonly used type of procurement method is the Request for Quotations method, or RFQ. This type of purchase is used to acquire all tangible property, such as equipment and supplies. The basis for award with this method is straightforward. The award is made to the lowest responsible bidder who meets all mandatory specifications. The next type is a Request for Proposals method, referred to as an RFP, and is typically used for services. This type is a best value procurement method and is limited to procurements with an estimated value of $250,000 or more. The agency must obtain approval from the Purchasing Division to use this method. They must submit their justification for using this process in writing, whether the solicitation will ultimately replace a current purchase order or contract, and identify what that contract is if it does. The RFP is received in two distinct parts: the technical proposal and the cost proposal. The evaluation is based on a 100-point total score, with cost representing a minimum of 30 of the 100 points possible. The technical proposal is opened first, and the RFP Evaluation Committee reviews and evaluates those, sending their written consensus to the Purchasing Division buyer. Vendors must score a minimum of 70% of the 70 points possible to be considered. This is known as the minimum acceptable score. Vendors who do not obtain the minimum accepted score, which is 49 points in most cases, are disqualified and removed from further consideration. The cost proposals are then opened. The Evaluation Committee will review the cost proposals, assign appropriate points, and make a final consensus recommendation to the Purchasing Division buyer. The award is based on the highest score, which is a combination of the technical proposals and the cost proposals. A second best value procurement method that we utilize is the expression of interest, or EOI. This type is utilized in the procurement of architectural and engineering services for projects estimated to exceed $250,000. The EOI includes a statement of qualifications and performance data and may include a vendor's anticipated concepts and proposed methods of approach to a project. The committee will evaluate the information submitted with the proposal and then develop a short list of 3 firms they believe are best qualified to perform the desired service. They will then meet with each firm on the short list to conduct an interview to discuss the anticipated concepts and the proposed methods. The committee will rank the firms deemed to be most highly qualified based on the information discussed during the interview and submit that list to the Purchasing Division. At that time, the agency will enter into negotiations with the most qualified firm as to the scope of service and price. If the agency fails to negotiate a satisfactory contract with the most qualified firm, they will then move on to the next firm. If negotiations fail with all firms, they will rebid the solicitation. We're now 3 years into the use of WV Oasis, the state's enterprise resource planning system. Along with the implementation of WV Oasis came a vendor self-service vendor portal. WV Oasis allows us to advertise all solicitations expected to exceed $5,000, with vendors having access to that information in real time. The advertising mechanism used in WV Oasis is called the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin. Using the vendor self-service vendor portal, vendors can search for current solicitations using keywords. They can view solicitations processed at the agency delegated level as well as those processed at the formal level. Within WV Oasis, solicitations are assigned an A or a C in front of the document name. Those with an A are processed at the agency level, and those with a C, which stands for Centralized, are processed by the Purchasing Division. As previously mentioned, a vendor does not have to be registered to submit a bid. However, one of the benefits of registering is that the vendor can assign itself commodity codes, which means that they would be notified any time a solicitation is publicized using those commodity codes. This makes it much easier for the vendor to stay informed of ongoing solicitations. The Purchasing Division requests the assistance of the state agency in evaluating the bids for its solicitations since they wrote the specifications and have a full understanding of what they need. After they review the bids, the agencies then submit a recommendation for award to the Purchasing Division. For formal acquisitions or those exceeding $25,000, the Purchasing Division is the only entity that can issue or change those contracts, and all questions regarding those contracts should be directed to the Purchasing Division buyer who is or was responsible for processing that contract. After the evaluation process, the Purchasing Division will send the contract to the Attorney General's office for approval as to form. Upon approval, the contract is then encumbered by the Purchasing Division and sent to the vendor. Encumbrance ensures that the agency has the funds to make that specific purchase. No work can begin until the vendor has the encumbered purchase order or contract in hand or until a notice to proceed is issued. The Code of State Rules gives vendors the opportunity to challenge the contract specifications written by the agency or to challenge the ultimate contract award. The protest of specifications allows the vendor to protest the specifications prior to the actual award being made and prior to bids being opened, and they must be submitted no later than 5 working days prior to the bid opening. The protest of specifications is intended to guard against an agency that inadvertently drafted specifications that circumvent the requirement that competitive bids be obtained. This may be done by including specifications that are too restrictive that only a few vendors can meet them, or by including specifications that are too vague, allowing vendors to provide a less than acceptable quality level commodity or service. The protest of award, on the other hand, is the most common type of protest received by the Purchasing Division. This type of protest must be submitted no later than 5 working days after the award is made, which is the day the contract is encumbered. There are several reasons a vendor may protest the contract of award. The winning vendor might not be a resident, as they claimed, and for which they received a preference during the evaluation process. The winning vendor may have bid inferior commodities that are not, in fact, equal. Or the winning vendor may have failed to meet a mandatory specification which was ultimately missed by the agency and or the Purchasing Division during the evaluation process. So we've talked about the various types of competitive procurements, but now I want to touch on some other types. The first is sole source procurements. Sole source means that a commodity or service is unique in nature and is only available from one known vendor. In all cases, the law requires that agencies document their attempts to secure competition. For purchases up to $25,000, the agency declares and processes its own sole source procurements and must provide written justification in the agency file. This will be important to remember for when our Purchasing Division inspectors go to your agency to inspect its purchases for compliance. For sole source procurements that are expected to exceed $25,000, the agency must complete and submit to the Purchasing Division a sole source request for consideration form to determine the basis for the sole source procurement and the specific efforts made to determine the availability of other sources. The Purchasing Division will then advertise the potential sole source purchase in the West Virginia Purchasing Bulletin that I talked about earlier on the vendor self-service to allow vendors the opportunity to express interest in the sole source procurement. What this means is that if a vendor expresses interest and provides proper documentation that they can, in fact, provide the commodity or service in question, then the Purchasing Division may reject the sole source and require the agency to competitively bid that commodity or service. If no vendors respond, however, the Purchasing Division may then proceed with a direct purchase with the sole source vendor. West Virginia Code also recognizes that purchases may be necessary when unforeseen causes arise, including delays by contractors, delays in transportation, an unanticipated volume of work, flooding to workplace buildings, power outages, or fires. 3 bids are required for emergency purchases if possible. Emergency purchases that are expected to exceed $25,000 must first be approved by the purchasing director. However, if the emergency occurs after business hours, on a weekend, or on a holiday, the agency may proceed with the emergency purchase, but must follow up with the purchasing director on the first business day with their justification and all documentation. An emergency purchase is a short-term solution to fix a problem and may not be used as a permanent or long-term solution or to circumvent the normal competitive bidding process. Instead, an emergency purchase allows for an immediate solution to a problem until it can be properly bid. Keep in mind that emergency purchases are not used for hardship resulting from neglect, poor planning, or lack of organization by the spending unit. The Purchasing Division also maintains a non-competitive exempt list of commodities and services, which is updated each July. This list can be found at Section 9 of the Purchasing Division Procedures Handbook. The Purchasing Director has the authority to determine that it is not possible to obtain certain commodities and services through the competitive bidding process, and Purchasing Division approval is not required for these procurements unless specifically noted. However, spending units purchasing from vendors under the exempt list must continue to observe the standard purchasing procedure associated with a normal purchase of the same dollar amount, including vendor registration, and must continue to submit contracts to the Attorney General's office for approval as to form. Now let's discuss what to do in the event that you experience any issues with vendors. First and foremost, ensure that you understand the contract in its entirety and its requirements. Does the issue tie back to a specification that the vendor has failed to meet? Have you brought up the issue with the vendor? In some cases, they may not even know that there's an issue. Make sure to give them an opportunity to make things right. Be sure to document all efforts made to resolve the issue, including phone conversations, emails, and letters. And finally, if multiple attempts to resolve the issue have failed, you can complete the Vendor Performance WD-82 form and submit it to the Purchasing Division with all supporting documentation and correspondence. If one agency has an issue with a vendor, other agencies may as well. Having that documentation will assist the Purchasing Division in coming to a solution of how to proceed. Now that we've discussed the organizational structure of the Purchasing Division, in addition to the various types of procurement methods, I'll briefly touch on other programs that are administered by the Purchasing Division. The first is the Travel Management Office. The Travel Management Office offers guidance regarding the state travel policy, which governs state employees who are conducting in-state, out-of-state, and international business travel with the state of West Virginia. This policy addresses such areas as transportation, lodging, meals, registration fees, other expenses, and forms of payment. Fixed assets. Agencies are responsible for certifying their inventory by July 15th of every year. The agency head must certify the date of the last physical inventory, that all items meeting entry requirements have been entered into the fixed asset system, and that all retired items were retired in accordance with surplus property policy procedures and guidelines. A physical inventory must be conducted once every 3 years. And the final program is surplus property. The West Virginia State Agency for Surplus Property is responsible for the disposition of commodities or expendable commodities no longer needed by the state, or more specifically, the owning state agency. surplus property must approve all methods of disposition related to the commodities regardless of the acquisition cost. This slide leaves you with a few helpful resources should you wish to learn more about the state purchasing process, including the procurement officer listing I mentioned earlier in this presentation, the Purchasing Division's website, the Purchasing Division Procedures Handbook, which I would encourage each of you to bookmark on your computer, the Vendor Procurement Guide, and our intranet site. Please keep in mind that we'll take a few minutes at the end of today's presentation to answer any questions that you may have, so please continue to send those questions to the host. On behalf of the Purchasing Division, I appreciate your attention. We will now prepare the presentation slides for the purchasing card portion of today's training, and we'll take a 5-minute break before we get to that part.
Well, welcome back, everyone, and welcome to the second hour of our fall session. My name is Travis Molinax. I'm a training administrator for the Purchasing Card Program, and on behalf of the State Auditor, John B. McCuskey, and the Deputy State Auditor, Amy Lewis, on behalf of everyone in the PCard Division, we'd like to welcome you to this second hour. As we begin, I'd like to take a moment to just thank Courtney for an excellent job the first hour, and really appreciate the Purchasing Division and all that they do on behalf of the state. We are privileged to have excellent quality professionals in the Purchasing Division, so thank you. As we begin, I'd like to first of all acknowledge the fact that the Purchasing Card Program is actually 21 years old, believe it or not. It's been around since 1996. It was implemented then under West Virginia Code 12-3-10, and of course is governed by Legislative Rule 155, CSR 7. What I'd like to do, though, since many people have already heard of the PCard program, I would like to take a moment, though, and discuss why the PCard is here. Why is this program such an important program on behalf of the state of West Virginia? We'll also discuss the traditional versus PCard processes, and we'll talk about the benefits for vendors as well as the state as a whole. But first, let's ask that question again. Why the PCard? It is just simply a method of payment, but why is it different than the rest? Why is it so important for the state of West Virginia? Certainly in this time of financial hardship, we are all looking for ways to save the state money, and ultimately to do so without eliminating any jobs. And I'm sure there are many state programs currently in operation today in the state that saves the state money. However, the PCard program itself actually costs the state nothing, and yet the financial returns are millions of dollars. If I may, let me explain. If we could take a second and think about two types of payment processes, comparing them, if you will. The traditional procure-to-pay process, which often involves a requisition, a purchase order, an invoice, and a check payment. If we compare that to a PCard process, or to the PCard process, we will quickly begin to uncover the numerous benefits the PCard makes, and therefore becomes the preferred method of payment in state government. You see, the transactional or the process cost you have to consider when you use the traditional procure-to-pay process. And regardless of the cost of the item, the processing cost is the same. So in other words, if the process cost of a $25 purchase is the same as a $10,000 purchase, often the process cost itself actually exceeds the value of the item being acquired. Now, many studies have gone into the estimate cost of a traditional process, and those estimates can range between a $50 process cost upwards to around $200 per transaction pushed through the traditional to procure to pay process. Most organizations recognize that a large dollar of check payments are made for low value items. And ultimately, this is a very costly and inefficient process. And when the payment method is switched, though, from the traditional to the PCard, we have instant efficiency savings ranging from 55% upwards to 80% of the traditional cost. Per an evaluation from the National Association of the Purchasing Card Professionals, the typical savings resulting from PCard usage are $63 per transaction. I want you to think about that. $63 per transaction of savings can be found by utilizing the PCard instead of the traditional procure to pay. What this means is that this translates into millions of dollars in savings alone, just in cost avoidance. But not only are there cost avoidance savings to be found with the PCard, using the PCard makes the state a better business partner with vendors. Vendors that accept the PCard, which right now is under the Visa platform, accept the PCard for payment, they can reap considerable benefits that outweigh whatever cost related to the card that they might incur as a result of being a vendor that accepts the card. Such benefits include, for example, cost reductions associated with the elimination of invoice creation, handling and mailing costs, depositing payments and collection activities. Vendors, you see, receive payment from PCard related transactions in 2 to 3 days, which considering the traditional procure to pay process, which can take upwards to 90 days or longer, this really makes the vendor a much more satisfied individual or vendor because they're able to receive their money back. They're able to then buy more inventory to restock their shelves. They are a much happier business because the profits are coming to them much more quickly. And why? Because utilizing the PCard, they're able to get paid in 2 to 3 days versus a 90-day window. So no doubt the state of West Virginia is a better business partner when the PCard is used as the method of payment. But are there other benefits to the state? Of course there are. One of the benefits for state agencies is that they have approximately 30 days to reconcile their bill or to pay their bill to the issuing bank, and which enables the state treasurer's office to invest the money longer. Some of you might be aware of this already, but currently the state of West Virginia, the state PCard program itself is considered one of the best programs throughout the entire country when compared to other state and local government PCard programs. So in order to maintain this ranking, though, we need to make sure the PCard is being used properly and is the payment mechanism wherever Visa is used. From a public relations perspective, the PCard program has become the leading program throughout the country, and this relates to the state and government and local government programs because we are able to have a PCard program that impacts all of state government and all of local government, and there are not many other states in the country that can boast this. Operationally speaking, the use of the PCard effectively decreases account payable expenses. It cuts administrative program costs, and it offers a high-level increased control and monitoring of payments, making the PCard the preferred method of payment. Think about it in this terms. When the PCard is utilized, the moment it is swiped, we know about it. We know exactly where the cardholder is located. We know the vendor. We know the cost. We know the item. All of that is transparent to us because it is an electronic transaction. Using a traditional procure-to-pay method, oftentimes it takes many days and a lot of paperwork involved. It's hard to sometimes capture if someone is trying to intentionally fraud the state. So therefore, using the PCard truly does make sense and is the preferred method of payment. Some statistics for you that might be interested, you might be interested in, is that in the last fiscal year, 2017 fiscal year, there was approximately 586,000 transactions put on the card, about an average of $631.61 per transaction, which equates itself to a $370 million in volume. Now, considering what I shared with you earlier of the $63 estimated cost of going through a traditional procure-to-pay process, if you apply that $63 cost and many other different elements to consider, we are around $37 million in cost avoidance savings. In other words, if as a state as a whole, we would have taken that 586,000 transactions, and instead of using the PCard, we would have pushed through the traditional method, it would have cost the state $37 million to do that. Which kind of begs the question, are there other transactions that actually went the traditional route, costing the state money as a result, that actually could have been put on the PCard instead? It's an important question that I would ask all of you to think about. Many times in the office we receive calls and conversations from agencies to which they, in that conversation, it comes to light that they are doing business with a vendor. That vendor does accept the Visa as a method of payment, and the agency acknowledges the fact that they have actually done business with that vendor partially on the PCard as a payment mechanism and partially through the traditional procure-to-pay process. And of course, in those conversations, we have that dialogue as to why. Why would you select the traditional procure-to-pay process with a vendor that accepts the Visa? Why the partiality in there? So part of the recommendation we would have, and I would like for all of you to consider as you, maybe as a takeaway from today, is to take a good look at the vendors by which you are doing business with. And if they accept Visa as a method of payment, but you guys are not utilizing the PCard as the method of payment, to maybe consider utilizing that instead. As a result, it will benefit the state as a whole and save the state money. To help agencies with the management of the PCard program within their agency, we established the Policies and Procedures Manual. Of course, it was implemented with the program back in 1996. Naturally, with any policies and procedures, there are different versions, and the most recent version you can find on the auditor's website, purchasing card section, and you are welcome to print that off for your records. It is the minimum standards, though, by which agencies must abide by. They have the right to become more stringent internally, but they have to at least abide by the minimum standards. With that understanding, a state agency must also develop and implement internal control procedures that comply with all policies and procedures, with all rules and regulation. And these policies and procedures, internal controls, they go through and to make sure or to ensure that the program there at the agency level follows all the rules and guidelines that they need to, and to do it with the utmost integrity. In order to be a successful program within the agency, though, it is necessary to have coordinators, and we'll discuss some of the rules and the responsibilities that coordinators are entrusted with later on in the presentation. But everyone, including agency heads and CFOs, department heads, managers, supervisors, everyone that within an agency is part of the PCard program, they are responsible to know the policies and procedures. In other words, if you're a person that is setting eyes on transactions, if you're a person that is in charge of the review process of PCard transactions, if you are of a position, again, agency head, you cannot just wipe your hands away and say, I don't have to know the policy and procedure. You actually have to be invested in understanding the full scope of the policies and procedures and what that means within your agency. And you are responsible then to do your job well. The agency head, though, is the one that is ultimately responsible for the administration, the monitoring, and the oversight of the program. They need to dig their feet into this, get their hands dirty, if you will, and be engaged in the program to help it be successful, to understand that when the agency head is fully involved in their leadership, the agency is able to really maximize the use of the PCard. And we greatly appreciate that leadership. Transactions naturally are permitted once all the rules and the guidelines and you make sure all the applicable laws are followed. If you've done so, then certainly if you've checked all that, if you checked with purchasing and they say, yes, you can buy the item, then certainly the PCard can be the method of payment for those items. We in the PCard division will never instruct or tell an agency that, yes, you may purchase this item we will always tell you, you must follow the rules and regulations. And if they say yes, then certainly the P-card can be used as a method of payment. We have 6 different types of purchasing cards that are available. They are listed here on your screen. Certainly the most common is what we call the one card. The one card is able to be used for the purchase of all goods and services on behalf of the state. Naturally, we understand this. This really goes without saying, but I might as well say it at this point in the presentation. We are all then entrusted as stewards of taxpayers' money, and we are to be good stewards of that money. And these 6 different cards allow us to do that with excellence. The state P-card, the one card, the most widely used card is there, and it is not locked down to any merchant category code. In contrast, the travel card itself is locked down, and as well as the ghost card, locked down to specific merchant category codes that are considered travel-only type codes. What this means is that those cards can only be utilized at vendors that are classified as travel type commodities or merchant categories. We also have what is called a virtual card. That is a newly developed card in the industry itself, and we won't talk a lot about that, but to kind of give you an idea on this, considering the industry's desire to become more secure, a virtual card is not a physical card that a card holder carries around, like the one card or a travel card, but the virtual card is a virtual number. When a transaction takes place, it's actually the vendor will communicate with the bank. The bank will issue a virtual card number that the vendor can utilize for this transaction, and once it is utilized, that number is gone. It is not used again. This, of course, is an excellent idea and concept because the chance of fraud is greatly reduced as that number is no longer viable. It is just used for that one-time situation, as an example. The P-card can also be used for fleet vehicles and can also be used as an emergency card when, for state of emergency type situations. All of the cards in light of in the credit card industry have what is called chip and PIN. Many of you probably have a personal credit card or debit card to which you have the chip and PIN technology associated with it. It works the exact same way as your personal credit card, to where it is necessary for the card holder to activate the card. In that activation process, they establish their PIN. This PIN is a unique number that the card holder must not share with anyone, including their boss, the coordinator, anyone. This is a unique number that only the card holder should know. And this is all around the understanding of PCard security. We need to make sure that we do not share any of the PCard information with anyone. That's part of the cardholder's responsibility to understand that they shouldn't share their bank statement with anyone. Their card should not be left out on their desk or open to a drawer that anybody can come and retrieve or utilize. You should delegate that card to somebody for them to use. This card has your name on it. It is your responsibility, and you need to make sure that your people do that with excellence. That being said, of course, there are situations, though, that naturally a coordinator is reviewing transactions, and they naturally, because they have taken a different level of training, they have been entrusted with the responsibility of the coordinator, they naturally will see some of that cardholder information, and that is acceptable because they have been designated a coordinator that comes with the territory. There are certain transactions that we receive on a monthly basis, really daily basis, that go through PayPal or Amazon Marketplace. These are what are considered third-party payment processors. And in part of the policies and procedures, it states there, it is a requirement that all agencies that are doing transactions utilizing a third-party payment processor must get prior approval from our office before initiating those transactions. So cardholders, they need to make sure that before they click checkout on an online purchase through PayPal or something, that they have to get the waiver form first. So that means they need to stop, keep everything in their checkout, and then they need to contact the coordinator, say, hey, I have a transaction that is going to go through a PayPal, a third-party payment processor, and I know I need to get a waiver form first before I continue. The coordinator would then reach out to our office to get that waiver, and then once granted, the cardholder can continue with that purchase. The same about gift cards. Gift cards are also need to receive prior approval from our office. Many of our higher ed institutions, our friends there, they utilize the use of the gift cards for different incentives within the students there. That is certainly acceptable, but they do need to receive prior approval from the PCard division before using the PCard to obtain those gift cards. West Virginia, of course, is tax exempt from all in-state vendors. Naturally, though, if it is the cardholder's responsibility, though, to make sure they have with them the tax-exempt certificate. Certainly, this is an important element that all cardholders need to have with them whenever they do business, because it is the vendor's right to ask them for this certificate. Even though you're using the PCard and even though it is a tax-exempt because the purchase is on behalf of the state, it is still crucial that the cardholder has the tax-exempt certificate. They can provide it to the vendor at the point of sale, and then the vendor should indeed remove any tax associated with the transaction. This is also the same for any travel-related transaction, again, in-state transaction. If you have questions about travel-related taxes, you may certainly reach out to the PCard travel team, and they would be able to answer any travel-related question that you may have, to include taxes and whether or not they are exempt. A convenience fee or a checkout fee can be paid with the PCard at the discretion of the spending unit. Now, let me take a moment to, first of all, differentiate between a convenience fee and a checkout fee. They are different, and the rules that govern these fees are different. A convenience fee can best easily be described as this. You are a cardholder, and you are going to make a purchase for an item. But instead of going to a and this vendor is typically a face-to-face type transactions. But instead of going to this vendor, you're choosing to maybe go online through a different avenue to obtain access. For example, let's just say you were going to a movie theater. In our personal life, we go to the movie theater, and normally we go directly to the movie theater to make the purchase of movie theater tickets. Well, instead of going to the movie theater, though, I can go to a website, fandango.com, for example, and obtain the movie tickets through this website. Fandango would be able to charge a flat rate convenience fee for the convenience of using their website to obtain those goods. That is a convenience fee. It has to be a flat rate for the convenience of using them instead of the typical avenue by which to obtain those tickets in my example. Now, this is different than a checkout fee. A checkout fee is actually based on a percentage that can be no more than 4%. And a checkout fee, it can only be done on a point-of-sale type transaction, meaning this, like you go to a vendor, and the vendor, of course, accepting Visa or a credit card, in our case, Visa as the credit card, as a checkout fee, because they have to pay, in order for them to be able to offer Visa as a method of payment, there's an exchange rate that they pay. They are allowed to turn around and charge a checkout fee to the customer that does not exceed that exchange rate that they as a vendor have been set up as, and it cannot exceed 4%. They also have to advertise that. They have to make it known to the customer that, hey, customer, there will be a 2% checkout fee, for example, or whatever the checkout fee is going to be. It's this percentage, and you as a spending unit, it is to your discretion as to whether or not you would like to move forward with that transaction in light of the checkout fee. If you have any questions about the difference of those, you're certainly welcome to reach out to us. This is a credit card industry This is not something that we as the Purchasing Card Division have established. This comes from Visa and MasterCard themselves. Within the policies and procedures in Section 6.9, we detail in great detail, actually, the differences between the two. We would welcome everyone listening today to go to the PCard Policy Procedures, Section 6.9, and read about the differences of the convenience fee and the checkout fee, and understand that vendors, what they are or are not allowed to charge in light of how they are set up or established. Within West Virginia Code 12-3-10, there are different things itemized there, and I would certainly welcome you to take a look at that in your off time. Maybe when you find some spare time to go read some West Virginia Code. But ultimately, what the code is designed to do, of course, is to establish the program itself. And the one thing that we want to clearly state on behalf of the PCard program is that proper utilization of the card is very important. Are you guys maximizing the use of the card, maximizing the efficiencies of the card? And as I've outlined earlier today, it saves the state money when the PCard is used. There are the potential of penalty fees being assessed, and that is only to the discretion of the state auditor. At this point in time, at no point in the history of the program have those fees been initiated, but it is in the code, and again, to the discretion of the auditor. But proper utilization is important, and that is the point that we would like to give with this particular slide. I would like to take a moment now and just go over some of the duties and responsibilities of the coordinator. They are very important. We recognize that for the coordinators, most of these people, their role as coordinator is not the only thing they do at their job. They are very busy people. They wear many hats within the agency, and we are so grateful and thankful for them. But it makes sense for us now in the presentation to kind of go over some of the duties and responsibilities. But first of all, as a reminder, it is the agency head who is the ultimate coordinator. They are the one that, again, is in charge to make sure that all of the internal controls are in place. They're in charge to make sure there are enough coordinators in place within the agency so that the PCard program can be successful. So if you find yourself listening today and you are unsure whether or not you have enough coordinators in place within your agency, maybe I would encourage you to have those conversations with those that are currently served as a coordinator. Ask them, is their workload too much right now? Are they feeling swamped? And if they are, maybe identify those other individuals within the agency that could step up, rise up to a coordinator position to help alleviate some of the stress that comes with the position. Each coordinator should hold a position of knowledge and experience of all the responsibilities dedicated to them. But not only just the coordinators that we know of today, but it is also imperative that we have someone that we simply call a financial coordinator that is also established and recognized within your agency. And here's the reason why. Because it's quite possible that within your agency, you have the primary coordinator, and let's just say that primary coordinator, though, life happens, and that coordinator is no longer in the office at the time when they need to do their part as coordinator, which is to pay the bill, the master bill on behalf of the agency. Well, each agency needs to establish a financial coordinator, somebody who is knowledgeable of the accounting strings within the agency, somebody that has enough financial knowledge to where they can go in and they will be given the authorization to select the pay flag, to authorize the payment of transactions so that your master bill at the agency level can be paid on time. This is very important. So if you as an agency only have one primary coordinator and you do not have a backup coordinator, then one of the takeaways for today is to figure out who within your agency can be that backup coordinator. It's very important that each agency has two coordinators that have the same rules and the same access in order to ensure that the master bill at the agency level is paid on time. No cardholder should be their own coordinator. We recognize that there are many coordinators that also are cardholders, and that's fine. That is perfectly acceptable. But as such, that individual, though, should not be reconciling and authorizing the payment of their own transaction. They should not be reviewing or authorizing payment unless they receive a waiver from our office. And there are many of our friends in the boards and commissions that have smaller offices to where, in those circumstances, they have received those waivers. Within 30 days of assuming the duties and responsibilities that are given to a coordinator, they need to complete their training. Training for a coordinator happens on an annual basis. Naturally, there are training elements over ethics, the policies and procedures, emergency, card, travel guidelines, many different varieties of elements the coordinator is responsible to know. Additional training naturally is available for all spending units should they seek it. If you would like us to come in and to help you all with some training to help your people, if you're having maybe your annual conference within your agency and you would like to invite us to come, we would more than welcome those invitations and have those dialogues with you, even if it's just simply to get some information from us, maybe some advice from us. We are here to help you. We are here to help you become successful. So please certainly reach out to us. Here's a listing of some of the duties that a coordinator has. I won't read through all of them, of course, but you're certainly welcome to look on the slide and read through them. I would like to highlight a few of these things. We have found in the last 3 or 4 years, though, that there has been a tremendous turnover of retirees, state employees that have served the state for many years and have long earned their retirement. And we certainly are thankful for their service. But as a result, though, when they retire, their cards also need to be canceled and destroyed. So please, as an agency, it is the coordinator's responsibility to make sure that not only does that card holder need to turn in their cards, but they need to be canceled, they need to be destroyed, so that we have a clean system of record of when all that takes place. Any limit changes is to the discretion of the coordinator, and those can be done at any point in time to the discretion of the agency. Naturally, any new information needs to be disseminated down the ranks to all cardholders, everyone involved. In a training like today, if you're hearing some new information, please make sure you disseminate this information down to your people so that they are fully engaged and knowledgeable in what's going on. Any ethics law violation, it is the coordinator's responsibility that they notify us about that, as well as, of course, the Ethics Commission first and foremost. Some reviews are necessary of the PCard program. This is a coordinator responsibility, but it is also a responsibility of the CFO or the agency head. You need to always do review of your program. Do your people have limits on their cards that are higher than they should be, or maybe not high enough based on their job duties? Are you maximizing the use of the card to the vendors that accept the card? Your internal controls must be submitted in writing to our office. This is not a new requirement. It's been in place since 1996. It's an imperative thing that we know what your internal controls are. This is necessary because if our auditors would come to audit your agency, they obviously need to have the standards or the guidelines by which they are auditing against. So please make sure you visit your internal control procedures. If you don't know whether or not you have submitted your internal control procedures to us, you certainly may send us an email. That is pcardoperations@wvsao.gov. You may send us an email and inquire as to whether or not we have your internal control procedures. And then we will do our best to locate them and to provide them to you if you would need them. But otherwise, just please double check to make sure we have them in writing to our office. Every month, the master bill is due, as I've spoken earlier in the presentation. It is due at what is called the scheduled payment date. Each month, that date can change, so we need to make sure that you are aware of that. I can tell you for the month of November and December in particularly, because they are holiday months, the scheduled payment date is earlier than normal. I believe for the month of November, it is the 16th or 17th of November, and so we need to make sure that all of the transactions are reconciled appropriately by that date. And the scheduled payment date is located on each transaction. If you look in Oasis, all the transactions have that scheduled payment date. And there's also a table within Oasis called the PCNFG that lists all of the scheduled payment dates for every single month of the fiscal year. Any application or maintenance request the coordinator is responsible for, they use a form called the PCC, and they make those requests within Oasis. We process those forms every single day. It's an electronic form so that your cardholders will be able to maximize and fulfill their job duties instantaneously. There is a very important need to make sure that any card that is lost or stolen is reported to our office, but more importantly, first, to the financial institution. Right away, within 24 hours. We want to minimize the level of risk as much as possible. So it is important, though, to make sure that all of your cardholders, as well as yourself, understand that they need to report that lost or stolen card right away. First, they need to call the bank first. Then they need to call the coordinator, and coordinator, they need to call us in the purchasing card division so that we can, again, reduce the risk threshold by shutting down the card as quickly as possible. There is an insurance policy per card. It's important that each card is signed on the back of the card. There is a $100,000 insurance policy on each card, and so we need to follow these procedures so that we can obtain the full use of that insurance policy given to us. The last element I want to discuss here for our hour today with me is on behalf of the cardholder, what are their responsibilities? The cardholder is responsible for the reconciliation of all of the transactions they do, but first of all, they need to make sure they understand all of the guidelines and internal controls within your agency and the policies and procedures. What are they supposed to do? You have a new person that just became a cardholder. Do they know step one? This is what's expected of them. Step two, what are the types of purchases that they are being expected to make? Are they following all the rules and regulations? Is there a procurement document that's in play to where the PCard is being used to release the encumbrance of that procurement document? All of those things they need to be knowledgeable of. All of the transactions, though, that are done, again, every swipe that's made, that information is being loaded into Oasis, whether directly or through interface process or other approved electronic methods. All of those transactions will come into Oasis, and each of those transactions must be reconciled every single month by the scheduled payment date. It is the cardholder's responsibility, though, to make sure that every single transaction is legitimate, that it's for official state business. Equally so, it's important to make sure that the coordinator or those managers or those supervisors are doing their thorough review of all the transactions just to make sure that every single one of the transactions are, again, for state business. This is important. Now, whether the cardholder, him or herself, goes into Oasis to reconcile their own transactions or a proxy does this on behalf of the cardholder, again, it is important to make sure that every single transaction is reconciled by the scheduled payment date. The review process by the cardholder or by the coordinators, as I mentioned, is paramount for the success of the program. And the authorization of payment, though, is done at the transaction level. And what that means is that every single transaction has what's called a pay flag. And that person who has been given the authority to authorize payment will literally go in there, review the transaction, review the documentation, and authorize their payment by checking that pay flag. And this is done at the transactional level. There is what's called in Oasis business intelligence. This is our reporting universe where there are many reports available. For PCard, we are under the financials and then the procurement option under BI. We have many different reports available. You are certainly welcome to utilize those reports to help make the PCard program successful for you. We are constantly working hard at adding reports to the PCard portion within BI, again, with the effort to help make you more successful within your agency. Supporting documentation. This is a big one because it is important that we have proper supporting documentation for every single transaction that is done. Receipts, invoices, if you have a PO, or whatever the supporting documentation is that's required by all the laws and rules and regulations, anything that governs this, all of that needs to be part of the transaction as supporting documentation. Why? It's because this is the information that a coordinator looks at in their review. It's also the information that an auditor coming in to do their job is going to look at to make sure that, yes, this transaction, there's a supporting documentation that looks good. Agencies really should adopt a zero tolerance for missing or inadequate documentation. There really is no reason not to have that there. Now, just in case there's some missing in the policies and procedures, we recognize that sometimes maybe the receipt goes missing, or maybe the vendor gives a miscellaneous type of receipt. We clearly spell out in Section 7 of the policy procedures that in those circumstances, the cardholder needs to create that receipt that itemizes out everything that was purchased, giving the vendor name, their address, their phone numbers, all that information is spelled out in Section 7. And then they need to sign that, as well as the coordinator needs to sign it, the acknowledgement that, yes, this is now the receipt or the documentation for record in light of the missing or inadequate documentation. So please be sure to do so. I might as well also let you know there is a table within Oasis that's called the PRCUT, as in Tom, table. This is where all transactions go once they've been reconciled. A coordinator or a cardholder that has the appropriate roles are able to go to that table and upload any documentation after the transaction has been paid. Sometimes maybe paperwork arrives late. There is still time to upload that documentation to a transaction even after it's been paid. So we give that option available for you so that all agencies can truly establish a zero tolerance for missing or inadequate documentation. As a brief reminder, delegation is prohibited, and where we see this more often than not is when you may have somebody in a position of authority that has, let's say, a supervisor that has the card under their name, and they delegate their card to someone else to go out and to make the purchase. And maybe this, and we know this happens, but this is prohibited. And the reason why is because that card is in a person's name, and only the person's name, the name on that card, that person is responsible for the security of that card. If you're in a situation in your agency to where you know this is taking place, our recommendation is, instead of that supervisor in my example handing his or her card to somebody else, maybe consider recommending that someone else, that other person, be given a card themselves in their own name to where they can go out and use their card to make the same type of purchases. The final piece to consider is the fact that we are very serious in the state of West Virginia, all of us are, to recognize fraud, misuse, and abuse. We recognize that we are, again, have been entrusted to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and we take that very seriously. We take it seriously in every element of our job. And so to help us with this, we would ask that everybody listening today would just take a good hard look at their PCard program, but not just the PCard program, every element of your agency. You're obviously spending money on behalf of the state. And let's do our best to make sure that no fraud, misuse, and abuse is taking place. If it does, though, here is the code in 12-3-10, and it is your responsibility to make sure that you report any said instances of fraud, misuse, and abuse to the State Auditor's Office PCard Division within 24 hours of your discovery. This is very important. Please help us minimize those opportunities of fraud by capturing them, being good stewards of the review process, and then obviously because we have been trusted with the good taxpayers' money of the state. At this point, and throughout the presentations this morning, we have obviously opened up the chat within the WebEx for submissions of questions. At this time, there are members here from the Purchasing Division, as well as myself, that we would be willing to answer any questions that anyone may have through the chat. Well, thank you, everyone. We will keep the chat open a little bit longer, but on behalf of all of you that are attending today, and on behalf of the Purchasing Division as well as State Auditor's Office, PCard Division, we'd really like just to thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We hope this was informative for you. We hope you have some takeaways to bring back and discuss with those within your agency that make the decisions, and obviously you're one of them. So we're very grateful for you. At this point, we'd just like to remind you, for anyone that was not able to join us today via WebEx, there will be a posting of today's recordings available on the Purchasing Division's website. The link will also be available on the State Auditor's Office, and that link will be available within the next couple of weeks, so you can be looking out for that. And naturally, for those that do choose to view or listen to the recording today's recording, just make sure that you take the necessary steps to get the certificate of completion at the end of that recording, and then to submit that certificate as instructed. Again, on behalf of all of us here, we thank you so very much. Have a wonderful day. Take care.